All right, welcome all to Midlife Mastery. And of course, this is Brock Edwards. On today's episode, we are going to be learning from our guest, John MacDonald, the importance on focusing on what you can control and how to do it, using your comfort zone as a guide. And I love that aspect because so often we just think of a comfort zone maybe as our enemy versus a tool that we can use to get even better, and how to use small experiments to continually improve over time. Also, we'll be talking about changing your mindset to change your life. So, those are big topics, and we cover them pretty quickly. There's lots more in this conversation. So, if you're ready to change your midlife, man, let's get started on this. Now, I don't know if you've caught the past few episodes, but we had Gail Ginsler talking about defying midlife stereotypes. And Gail is amazing. She's a 60-year-old fitness enthusiast and lifestyle influencer, just living full out. I mean, I dare you to keep up with her. Before that, we had Jo Miller talking about becoming a woman of influence. Now, Jo is a woman's leadership expert. She's an author, and she shares what she learned from both of her parents undertaking huge career changes in their early 50s and how she's applied some of that knowledge to her own life. We also talk about the episode before that one, updates and setbacks on my journey to getting fit after 50. So it is not just a linear straight line success. There have been setbacks, and you can probably relate to them. And so talk a bit about those. And of course, if you're enjoying the podcast, I ask that you do a favor and just leave a review. Even just a few simple words around what is it that you enjoy about listening to the podcast? What was your favorite guest? What was your favorite topic? Those sorts of things. It does a couple things. One, it lets me know what you're getting out of the podcast so I can deliver more of that. And two, just the way internet algorithms work, it helps other people in midlife looking to improve discover the podcast and benefit from it as well. So you can leave a review on, whatever podcasts site you listen to them on, whatever app, or you can use a site called lovethepodcast.com/midlife mastery, and it'll give you several options. So it's a quick, easy way to do it. I really appreciate it. And now let's get started. All right, so today's guest, we have John MacDonald, otherwise known as JohnMacOnline. And so John, you're a software developer, team leader, coach, beginner. I stole all that straight off your Instagram page, so easy to describe you there. You've already described yourself that way. But you take it further. You talk about mind, body, and soul elevation, as well as training for life. That covers a lot of ground there. So how do you introduce yourself to people?
Yeah, first of all, it's a great question, and thank you for that. Your description was correct. I mean, that's a lot of what I tell people. But there's a lot of context associated with how do you introduce yourself, right? So yeah, I mean, I have sort of a day job, right? And I'm in the tech industry. I'm a software developer. I lead a global team of software developers. Been doing that for a long time. But I also have done many things on the side, business wise and content creation wise. I'm a writer and I'm a volunteer in various organizations. I coach sort of both people professionally, and I also, coach kids in sports. And so kind of a coach all over the place. And you mentioned the word that I like to use, and that's beginner, because I always, for me, I love to just remind myself that you need to be a beginner, right? And especially at this time in our life, I'm 51. I need to continue to embrace the beginner mindset, right? The beginner mindset. So that's really, when I introduce myself, that's kind of how I introduce myself, right? So.
Well, I love that thought of beginner, because it seems like at this stage of life to broadly and crudely divide people up into two groups, and I hate only doing two groups. I don't think the world's binary. I think, there's all kinds of shades in there, but it tend to either have people who, like, you've made it this far in life, you're probably pretty knowledgeable in some aspect of life and, consider yourself an expert. Or you reach the stage and it's like, I'm done learning, I'm old, I can't learn anymore. This is it. I've peaked. I'm just going to go be in the lazy boy and get through my day. I've heard very, very few people at this stage of life describe themselves as a beginner. And yet it strikes me, and one of the themes that keeps coming out of this show is that midlife is really a time for reinvention, not a continuation, not just extending on until you retire or die, but a chance to step back and reinvent. The guests that we have on this show tend to fall into two categories, and that is simply, people who have a particular expertise, or people who just seem to have midlife figured out or are working hard on it. And both groups we can learn from. And there's a lot of overlap, I've discovered. I thought they would be distinct groups, but really they overlap pretty heavily. Jay Coons, one of the first guests we had on, he is definitely kind of just broadly living life well. Whereas Bill Courtwright, he's living life well, but he has definite expertise around stress mastery. So anyway, as we got to talking, I see you definitely in more kind of the Jay Coons group of just doing a great job living midlife and developing that expertise. So anyway, a long way of getting to why I'm excited to talking to you today, John. And how does that beginner mindset play out in your life?
So yeah, I think the main. So I look at change as certainly inevitable, but also as necessary and a good thing, right? And when we get to this point in our lives, and in regardless of what your life has looked like until this midlife area, where whatever you just sort of describe or delineate midlife as from a number standpoint doesn't really matter, because it's more of a mindset anyway. But whatever your life was before, this part of our lives has specific benefits for most people, right? And I consider that for myself for sure. This part of our lives has specific benefits. And so, this beginner mindset is about embracing, okay, how do I take this part of my life and be, with this beginner mindset and move forward in the areas that I care about. Like one of the benefits that we have, I have a family, right? I have a wife, have 3 kids. Now of my 3 children, 2 of them are now young adults and out on their own. And I have another one who's 16 and in high school, but he's almost on that way out. And so what are the benefits from a beginning, not necessarily maybe beginning again, but from a beginning standpoint? Like, what are the benefits that this next stage of my wife and I's life has for us? And that means both together and also as individuals. Like, we talk about this, my wife and I talk about this all the time. Well, what are the things she wants to do? What are the things I want to do? And what are the things we want to do together? Right. And this embracing of the beginner mindset, just allows myself, and allows us to sort of be optimistic about things, right? And even like I said before, even if you've, when you get to your 50s, right, you've lived through a bunch of things that maybe were great, and you lived through a bunch of things that maybe were not so great. Some of your guests I've really appreciated because they've talked about some of the difficulties and the transitions, and how this part of our life allows us to, with maybe some time distance on some of those things, look back and find the kernels of gold in those areas. And it's not that it's not a struggle. It is a struggle. It can still be a struggle. But again, with the beginner mindset, right? And I look at all of this through the lens of this concept of focusing on what I can control. The epiphany for me, this epiphany of sort of change and being an agent of change, and mindset as the genesis of change. It started for me the first time I got put on a layoff list. I worked in big corporate America for a long time. And, when I was 35-ish, or I can't remember exactly, but around 35, first time I got stuck on a layoff list, right? And that was a wake-up moment for me. And then over the next 10 years after that, it happened again. I didn't get laid off that first time, but I have been laid off several times, right? I work in the tech industry. That goes with the territory. And I think for most of us, I don't know, Brock, have you ever had this experience yourself? Have you ever been laid off or essentially asked to leave or forced out of a position you were in?
Definitely. I suspect it's hard to get to this point in life without that happening at least once.
Exactly. And so, one of the things that I help people understand, I help people sort of get past the worry and the overwhelm and this fear, right? Like if you've gotten to this point, have you worked in the corporate scenario, if you've been an employee for a big part of your career, and that's, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And it's a great thing. It's my story for sure, but there's this fear. If you haven't been laid off yet, like you're going to be, if you've gotten to this point, and so it's coming. And so we need to, I help people sort of help understand and embrace this. Okay, how am I going to, manage myself and through this, and how can I come out the other side being better than I was, going into it, right?
I always like to think about identity, and career is a big part of people's identity. Certainly, some people more than others. But when you run into something like a layoff, and I know this is just one example, we could apply this to any example in life. Tell me a little bit about kind of separating out who you are from what you can control. And I'm not sure if that question makes sense, but it's just easy to get stuck on, I did all the right things. This is who I am. And now if I'm laid off, who am I really? And how does that aspect of control help that?
Yeah, first of all, it's such really great insight, right? Because sometimes you do all the right things, right? I'll tell you a quick story about the circumstances that led to that first time that I got, put on the layoff list. I was working in the in the tech world, in a semiconductor company, and we were working with, this was 2004, and we were working with the big gorilla in the tech industry, Apple, right? And we were building the next generation engine, CPU for their iPods, right? That's what I was working on. And, this was the time in our culture when this was the dancing silhouette commercials on TV. It was the time when if you went to the gym on a Monday, you'd see a few people with white headphones. If you went to the gym again on Friday, you'd see twice as many people with white headphones, and then again next week and the next week. And so this was the point where the iPod was just going stout. It was going, to the universe, right? And so here we are. We're working with Apple as to give them the next generation of this thing, and we're kind of a small team inside of our big company. And sure enough, things are going great. This is a no-brainer home run from a business standpoint, home run. And, I get called in an office to say, yeah, we're canceling the project, right? And the epiphany for me was, oh my gosh, doesn't matter how good I am at my job, how good of a person I am, how good the business can be or is going to be or looks. I have no control. In this situation, I have no control over whether I'm going to continue to be employed or I just don't have any control, right? And so that was the genesis for me, like that one singular moment. And that particular thing led me into being interested in looking for other ways to make income, real estate investing and a bunch of things I've done over the course of the years. But it was really this mindset shift. And oh my gosh, at this point in my life, I've got to figure out how I can go get some control over these things, right? And as I've said, it's happened to me several times since then. But now my mindset around it is totally different. I'm like, oh, okay, that's fine. I understand, because it's not me, right? When you mentioned, well, I've done everything right. I've did this, I did that, supposedly I did everything by the book. And why did this happen? Or why is it not happening for me? Yeah. So you can do everything right and you still don't have any control. So what I have done for myself personally, and what I help people understand is I differentiate between the world and my world, or your world, if we're talking together, right? So the world is all the stuff outside of my sphere of influence. And my world, your world, is all the things inside your sphere of influence, right? So for example, yourself, your personal self, obviously that's inside your world. Your circle of people, right? Family, friends, community, whatever that looks like to you, that's inside your sphere of influence. And then, of course, your work is inside your sphere of influence. And when I say work, it's not just your profession, although obviously your profession is a big part of it, but it's also the other things you do in your life, whether it's running a book club, volunteering at the church, coaching kids. Just the other things that you try to do to make a positive impact or stay engaged in the world. And so when we turn our focus into those three areas, that's when sort of the light comes on. And that's when you start to, the unnecessary worry starts to melt away. And listen, isn't this pandemic, this whole last year and a half, hasn't it like the biggest experiment in sort of collective, fear and anxiousness and, and so forth. I mean, haven't we collectively been, because we can't control what the government's going to do. We can't, in terms of regulations, we can't really control to 100% degree our exposure to, the coronavirus. And there's so many things that we can't control, but what can we control? Well, we control how we act on a daily basis. We can control our attitude about these things. We can control, if within the guidelines, how we conduct ourselves. We can control, what we do within our circle of people. We can control our mindset. We can control our belief, how we handle fear, all these things. So, that's what's interesting to me. And I try and help people, understand. So,
just from personal observation, and I'll throw personal experience in there as well. It seems like so often we do the opposite. We ignore, we miss everything that maybe we could control or influence, and spend all of our time focusing on fretting, railing against the things that we have zero control over. And I think that's more observation than question, but I certainly see people getting stuck there, fretting more about, you mentioned government regulation. Yeah, I'm probably not going to have any direct immediate control over that. Is that just because that's easier to dwell on? It removes responsibility from ourselves. Our own sphere of influence doesn't seem like that big of a thing. Like, I don't know, from your observation, why do we tend to get stuck there?
I think people, not everybody, of course, but I think, as a generalization, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not an academic in that area in any way. This is just my own personal observation. It's my own personal experience. None of the things that I say are, prescriptive or diagnostic in any academic sense, right? But just from an observation standpoint, I see that, people, this concept of embracing victimhood is something that resonates with people. Right. And I don't know why. I mean, I've done it myself, of course. I'm not saying that's not something that I do. I mean, I certainly have done it. It just seems easy, right? Like I think it seems easy to say it's not my fault, right? It seems easy to say that, okay, let's just take coronavirus, for example. You can't necessarily control your exposure to the coronavirus, even if you followed all the rules. But you can control your own health, right? You can't control how healthy, physically, emotionally, spiritually healthy of a life you live, right? But instead, and by the way, I think sometimes the system, whatever you want to define as the system, sort of feeds into this. And this is why this is part of the world, right? The system feeds this to us. Like, we're continually fed the line of the system is a problem or the system is the answer, right? And we're going to, you are just maybe a pawn in the game, and we're going to tell you what you need to know. And we're going to take care of you when you need to be taken care of. And we're going to, basically sort of lead you along. And I think, the magic comes from understanding that, okay, that's the world trying to sell me whatever it's trying to sell me. What I need to understand is, okay, well, what is my sphere of influence? What is my world? And how do I maximize that area? Right.
Well, the victimhood certainly, well, it's easier. Right. Like, because then I don't have to do anything. It's, someone else doing something. The nice thing is it absolves me of all responsibility. Of course, the downside is that nothing ever changes, never improves.
The responsibility thing's a big one.
Yeah, let's say more about that.
Yeah, I think responsibility, and I wrote about this not too long ago, about the concept of being on the hook, right? Which is really just a euphemism for, taking responsibility. And a lot of people they're just afraid of taking responsibility. But here's why. Because when you take responsibility, you expose yourself to emotional danger, right? And, even as an engineer, right, I'm very aware of the power of emotional danger because it's driven a big part of my life. This trying to protect myself from emotional danger. And taking responsibility is putting yourself on the hook and exposing yourself to emotional danger. And if you put yourself on the hook, you're responsible. Let's just take something benign, like just say something at work. All right, I'm the guy. I'm gonna go do it. I'm gonna do it personally. I've got my team, but yes, I signed up and I'm gonna go do it. Well, there's a possibility that you don't, right? Or even if you get it done, there's a possibility that it still goes sideways on you. And guess what? It may be your fault. It may not be your fault, but you may have to take the fall. And so I think when it comes to responsibility, we collectively, a lot of people just sort of start to, pull away from that because isn't it easier? Isn't it easier to take credit for things that other people did, which is both an executive and a political sort of approach to leadership? Or isn't it easier to say it's not my fault, it's somebody else's fault, right? But the change happens when we put ourselves on the hook. We sign up for the responsibility, right? And focusing on what you can control is 100% is signing up and taking responsibility for the things, right?
So when you started doing that, because you mentioned, kind of at 35-ish, that's kind of lesson coming home for you. What changes did you see once you started focusing on your sphere of control and the responsibilities that go with that?
Sure. Well, I got to be honest with you. The number one thing for me personally that melted away was worry, right? I mean, I found myself anxious at this time of my life. I mean, I was anxious about everything. 98% of which I had no control over, right? But I was just anxious, trouble sleeping and worried about this and that and the other thing. And, my family was obviously a young family at the time and all those things were going through my head, not just from a professional standpoint. I'm talking about holistically across my life. I was just worried about all these things, right? And so the number one thing when I found this concept, by the way, I talked about that epiphany, this road to Damascus moment, but that's not, this was a journey of 10 years, right? It really wasn't until my mid 40s where I really sort of understood all of, these things that were, had been brewing inside me. But that was the main thing. And then, but once this worry started to back away or to melt away, then I found, oh my gosh, now I'm starting to have more success, right? For example, both professionally and just in life, right? Started to have more success. I started to be happier. I started to look forward to, instead of worrying about what was in the past, I started to look forward and be happy about and optimistic about the things that were coming forward. And this is important. Not that I thought everything was going to be okay, but more so that I was equipped to manage and handle what was coming, right? It's led directly to some of the most important opportunities I've had in my life, certainly from a professional standpoint, but also some things in my personal life. And this is what I like to help people try and understand. So,
you touched on something there that I think there's this myth out there in the world that when we're doing everything right, we don't have any problems. And yet, someone I've learned a lot from, named Dr. Gerald Bell. He does a lot around leadership, and he has this concept that he calls 100 problems a day. And it's just the idea that all of us have 100 problems a day to deal with. I think it's an arbitrary number. I don't think he did a scientific study on that. Sometimes the problems are like, hey, what am I going to eat for breakfast? They're really easy problems. Sometimes the problems are much, much tougher, like, hey, should I end this relationship, quit the company, whatever? Most problems are somewhere in between. I said, but the people who are really good at dealing with problems are the ones who are not surprised that they have problems. Because there are some people who every day are absolutely shocked at the amount of traffic they experience on the way to work. Every single day, they're surprised by it.
That's so true, isn't it?
And we come up with a lot of examples there, but the ones who can deal with it, who will take responsibility, will take action for it, are the ones who are able to say, you know what? there's a lot of traffic at this time of day in the morning. What can I do about it? I can't control the traffic. I could control when I leave for work. I could just control my mindset about traffic. Lots of stuff I could do. So anyway,
Perfect.
I like the idea that, or I appreciate that your life, your problems didn't go away once you focused on control, once you focused on personal responsibility, but how you deal with it. The idea that you knew you could handle it. You were better equipped to deal with it. There was this optimism, not that problems don't exist, but yeah, when they come up, we'll deal with them.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, so that's a great nugget, and I'll give you I'll give you some actual concrete little tests that people can use, because these are tests that I've done on myself, right? So there's a virtual mentor of mine. His name's James Altucher. I'm sure many of your audience would know who he is. He's certainly a big guy in the podcast world, but he's written some good books too. And and he talks about this rule he calls the 10,000 experiments rule, and it's really just about doing these little experiments. You're like, that's how you progress forward. Is not just by thinking about things, but by doing things, right? And these little experiments. So when it comes to this concept of being able to deal with the problems that come your way, because they're coming, right? You're going to get laid off. You're going to have an existential crisis of faith. Someone in your family is going to get sick. Your kids are going to be angry with you. I mean, these things are coming. If it's not, you can't avoid these things. They're coming. And if you're not ready, then I mean, how are you going to perform, right? And so these are some things that I personally did to get outside of my own comfort zone to help just prepare me. These are simple little things, right? And there's no real risk in the world. The only risk is sort of this emotional, sort of danger, right? So here's a few things. Here's some, like, what I would call beginner exercises, right? Take a cold shower. Instead of taking a hot shower, take a cold shower. Skip a meal. Be hungry for a little while, right? Now, I'm an introvert, so some of these things are, tough for me, but wouldn't be tough for extroverted people. So I would get into an elevator and say hi to somebody, right? I mean, may sound ridiculous to an extrovert, why that would be getting out of your comfort zone. But for me, that was like traumatic, right? Here's another one. Overdress or underdress for an event. Like, in other words, dress in a way that somebody would comment on your appearance, right? Because now, when you think about it, those are beginner exercises. There's no risk, right? None of those things pose any real risk to you as a person. But it's just it's to start training your mind to get to operate outside the comfort zone, right? A couple other ones. If you're from a health or from a, I don't know, activity standpoint, sign up for something. Is it a Spartan race? Is it a triathlon? Is it a 5K? If running has never been your thing, is it a half marathon? I know you were training for, half marathon. Sign up, pay the money, put it on a calendar, right? Because guess what? Most likely that's going to motivate you to go do it, right? Hey, if you don't like to speak in front of people, find some place to go speak in front of people, right? Isn't that it? Like, I think public speaking is one of the most, widely held activities that people hate, right? Isn't that, it's one of the most, whatever, but it's just, so do it, right? Say yes to some weird opportunity that comes along your way, that most of the time you'd be like, no, I'm not doing that, right? Say yes to it. See what it is. Somebody invites you to, an event or a group that you wouldn't normally be a part of. Yeah, say yes. Go do it. Get outside your comfort zone, right? These are the things that train you. These little experiments train you. And I think at this point in our life, I think we can look back in this midlife. We can say, yeah, oh, wow, I've had those moments. What did I do with them? So anyway.
So I love experiments, and I love it because as a semi-reformed perfectionist, I tend to...
That's a great moniker for sure.
Yeah, I tend to get stuck in like, oh, this decision is for the rest of my life. But the more I can get it to, you know what, I'm just going to experiment. It is so powerfully freeing there's no obligation for anything to come out of it. I don't have to do it perfectly. I don't have to spend decades studying it. I can just go try something. But I have to get in that mindset. And I know some people don't have issues with that. But for me, helps get in that mindset. And as you were talking, giving some examples, I was thinking, you could actually just explain to people that it's an experiment. Like in the elevator, hi, I'm doing an experiment. How's your day going? And
That's amazing. First of all, I never thought about it that way, but that is an amazing way. Like you literally just explain it to them. Say, hey,
yeah,
I'm doing an experiment.
yeah, yeah. Like, wow, I see you're really inappropriately dressed. Yeah, it's an experiment. You know,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, listen, that's a great way to do it. And actually I think that's really helpful because it's a way to embrace it yourself without without really feeling terrible about it. Right? Listen, I'm terrible at small talk, right? So trying to, whether it's at a cocktail party or a networking group or in an elevator, like it's just not my thing, right? I'm just not very good at it. But if I would to explain to somebody, hey, I'm trying to experiment. Hi, how's your day? It takes all the pressure off. I love it, man. That's a great suggestion.
it really does. I think it would free it up from that kind of identity level of here's who I am. They're going to be judging me.
The
And
identity is so wrapped up in this for sure.
so, yeah, I really like that. And also the say yes to weird opportunity. They don't come up that often. And when they do, I don't know, if you're approaching it as an experiment, like, yeah, let's try it. Let's see where this goes. It is very freeing. And sometimes really good stuff comes out of that. And sometimes you learn that you never want that to happen again. I get that. But
Yeah, yeah. It's true. I mean, I did some thinking, wrote an article a while back on this concept of, what you say yes to and what you say no to. And what I've learned is that there's a science to saying yes, but it's an art to saying no. And here's why, because, saying yes is about expanding your opportunities. You have to say yes to things. If you never say yes to anything, then you will never have any opportunities. And the more you say yes to, at least initially, the more those opportunities compound. And so, to get outside your comfort zone and start saying yes, because for some people, outside of the comfort zone is saying yes to things. And for some people, saying, getting outside the comfort zone would be saying no, because some people are like, they have to say yes to everything because they would just feel bad if someone would ask them about something, ask them to do something or be involved in something, and they would just feel bad for saying no, right? But the science of saying yes is about opportunities. It's about numbers. It's about quantity. It's about finding the right thing, which is, basically numbers, right? But saying no to something is an art because that's where the emotion comes in. Because at some point it may be difficult to say no because of what I just, we don't want to let somebody down. I don't want to let somebody down. You ask me to do something, it must mean because you think I can do it and help you. And I'd love to be helpful, right? So, that's part of it. But sometimes, it's easy to say no because that's where you are in your comfort zone. So there's this emotional component that makes saying no an art. But the reality is, this is how I decide for myself what to say yes to and what to say no to. And you can and believe me, I've been through Google. I've been through all the self-help, articles and all that stuff. And I think there's like 65 billion of them. And I'm sure I've read all of them. But you could take all of that self-help advice and throw it away and just ask yourself one question when it comes to saying yes or no to a given thing. Which is harder for me in this particular moment? When I look inside my head and I say, do I find myself resisting the urge to say yes, or do I find myself resisting the urge to say no? And probably if you do what you're trying to resist, that's probably the right answer in the moment.
interesting. Say more about that. So if you do what you're trying to, so you're saying, hey, if it's harder for me to say yes, I should probably say yes.
Exactly. Because, right. And here's why, and again, this is what I've experimented with in my own life, right? Is my comfort zone is a stone cold sage for what I should be doing. For what I like, all I have to do is look at where my comfort zone is. And if there is something that takes me outside of that comfort zone, that's what I should go do. Right.
Okay.
And part of this journey of focusing on what I can control has been this revelation of using my comfort zone as a guide. Right. So, if someone, let's say someone asked me to do something, right? And I'm having trouble saying no because of the person and the thing that they're maybe asking me to do, right? I almost have to say no. But I almost have to say no because what I realized is I'm listening to my comfort zone there. My comfort zone is telling me to say yes because I don't want to disappoint the person or I want to be useful in the situation. But my actual self is telling me, yeah. But that's going to take away from, whatever this other thing is, and it's going to be distracting. It's not actually going to serve you or the other people. So, and listen, I say it's a stone cold sage. It's 100% true, but it's not necessarily 100% right. We do got to give ourselves the rope sometimes to, hang ourselves.
I appreciate that. It's more of a directional than a 100% right answer kind of thing. Yeah. And that there are always factors that will determine it. And as we were talking about earlier, you could still do everything right and it could still turn out wrong.
Exactly.
And
exactly.
And then we take what we learned from it, I guess.
Sure. But there's so much you can do right now in this part of your life, right? In this part of our life, you can take control of your health, right? You can take control of your self-talk, your belief in yourself. By the way, self-talk was a big thing for me. What I realized is the soundtrack playing in my head for most of my life was detrimental, was you can't. And guess what? If your subconscious hears something a million times, it's going to believe it. And the only person on this planet that can tell your subconscious something a million times is you, right? So focusing on your self-talk, focusing on things like, being intentionally or practicing intentional gratitude. Here's another one. Results and outcomes are typically not actually under your control. Just the level of activity you put into it, right? For example, let's say sales is what you're trying to do, right? You're trying to make sales. Okay. So one way to measure your sales is how many sales have I made? Or how many people have said yes? How many people have said no? But guess what? If you're trying to make a sale, whether it's something you've created or you're trying to sell something else, that doesn't matter. You can't control whether the other person says yes or no. You can't control it. You can be better at the skills of selling. You can be better at helping that person understand the benefits of what it is that you're trying to sell. But ultimately, it comes down to their decision. I mean, yes, you can be persuasive, all those things. But see, that's what you can control. You can control your skill development. You can control your getting better at the skills of sales, but you can't fundamentally control whether someone says yes or no, right? So that's the concept of figuring out, okay, what's inside my world and what's outside, what's in the world versus what's inside my world, right?
So as we talk about all this, John, and we'll start wrapping up here, but one of the things I want to make sure I ask you about is, so when we think about this, I'm always curious, what are you working on right now? Like, what are you trying to get better at? What are you kind of pushing your boundaries of control and comfort zone with right now?
Yeah, well, honestly, okay, so there's a simple answer to that. I'm trying to become a better writer. I'm actually working on a project. I have my blog, and it meanders a bit from a topic standpoint, but that's really just me trying to get better at writing. And I do it publicly to try and help people understand that, hey, wow, yeah, that article sucked, right? 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago. Oh my gosh, that was brutal. but and now, it's getting better. But the point is so that's my project is I'm trying to become a better writer, and I'm trying to, specifically help people in this area of focusing on what they can control, right? That is the project I'm working on. Now, in order to do, that's sort of the professional project or the work project I'm working on. But all of the things that we've been talking about are the things that I work on and lead into that, that topic. I work on controlling my time, my finances, my circle, my health, my daily routine, my self-talk. When you had Jay on and I really resonated with his, and I'm like raising my hand, he talks about his daily routine and, how I'm not nearly as, I would say, focused on the tracking and all of that, like he is. But, having a routine, having things that you do that are helpful works both from an accountability standpoint and from, get you going in the right direction. Right. And so, those are the things I do. And I work on my professional development on a daily basis. I'm 51. I work in the tech industry. A lot of people who are 50 in the tech industry would be like, oh my gosh, I'm too old. I can't, I can't get a job or whatever it is. And I feel like, no, I'm right in there. I'd be an asset to any startup company. Right. So those are the things that I work on. Okay. It's funny. I've been working on personal development, personal investment, whichever of those terms you like the best, since that sort of early, and from my mid 30s, it's kind of been a part of my life for sure. And I do it in all different ways, right? I mean, I read, I participate in things, I create, I talk with people, I experiment in my own life. I observe. I'm really interested when I talk to other people. A lot of times, I start asking them some questions that maybe they're a little, some of them are sort of nondescript and others are a little bit, maybe a little more probeful. Well, like I said, earlier in this conversation, I asked you if you had ever been laid off, right? And maybe not something that you want to discuss. I asked you because I'm interested. I'm interested in, what was your experience, right? And I think that's a key. I think that's a key to all of us in our collective, however we connect to the whole of our community, of our universe, of our, however you see that. I think that's a big piece for sure.
So as you work on improving your writing, John, where can people, you mentioned your blog, but where can people find that?
Yeah. So my writing is on I have a website. It's called JohnMacOnline.com. It's JohnMac online.com, JohnMacOnline.com. And it's just a blog now. It'll be transforming over time as I move more towards, basically some concepts around that, right? And other ways to reach out and help people, master this part of their life. So, and then you can follow, like from a social media standpoint, Instagram is kind of my main thing. So you can find me on Instagram. It's the same handle as the website. It's just at JohnMacOnline. Would love to see you there. My Instagram thing is mostly, I like to do a couple things. So I exercise every day, various things. I like to call myself a triathlete, but now I have shoulder issues in the sense that maybe I won't ever be able to swim again. That's unfortunate. And so again, a problem, right? I'm dealing with it. Yeah, I could still run and cycle. So I've been running and cycling for a long time. So I sort of document my adventures there. I also like, perspective is a big thing for me. So I usually take some photos of when I'm out running, out and about, and photos of everyday things that, from a different perspective. Anyway, so Instagram's my place. You can find me there, JohnMacOnline. I would love to connect with you and, see how things are going with all you guys. So.
Awesome. Well, John, thank you for being on today. Really, really appreciate it. Love the insights, love the approach, love the conversation around, what you can control, because it's a great reminder and it's so easy to miss. It is just one of those things that's so easy to get caught up in everything we can't control, instead of just being able to say, yes, this is an issue. What can I control? How am I going to approach this? What is my input in the situation going to be? So anyway, thank you very much, John. This has been awesome.
Yeah, thank you, Brock. And listen, you're doing a great job. This is a great service for people in this part of our lives. And so, I wish you all the best and keep going, man.
Appreciate it.